we see one executive order after another coming out through Obama right now.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, Obama was quoted, I think, just last week as saying that he's unhappy with the Constitution because it doesn't allow him to ram through his agenda as quickly as he wants.
Oh, boy, that darn Constitution. You know, it's either the Constitution or it's the UN Constitution, which is, I think, what you were talking about with Agenda 21.
Well, the UN treaty, the UN charter, has no force of law in the United States where it contradicts the Constitution. The Constitution is supreme. But until people take action, then the government will run roughshod over our rights.
Okay. Now, you were talking about, well, let's go back to the Carter administration. He put in, and I think it went through Congress as well, didn't it? This land use, trying to get the banks to sell.
The Community Reinvestment Act.
Yeah, was that in the 1977, or was that the one in 1990?
I don't remember. It goes back pretty far. It was essentially the root of the collapse.
Collapse. It started with Jimmy Carter, and then it went to through the Clinton administration.
A lot of it had to do with essentially extorting the lenders, threatening them with lawsuits if they wouldn't lend money to people who couldn't afford to pay the mortgages.
Okay, and the last time you were on the show, you made a connection between Obama, and he was right in the deal. You would think he was the innocent bystander by listening to him.
No, he was an attorney for Acorn. He actually was involved in extorting the lenders. So in effect, you could make a case that President Obama is personally responsible for the collapse of the housing market.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the media won't call him on it. And this is a way of, let's say, collapsing the housing market. I see a connection between the Communist Manifesto, Plank 1, and what just happened. Would you make that connection?
Anytime you have a transfer of wealth involuntary from one party to another, that's a violation of property rights. And in fact, Frederick Bastiat had an interesting definition. He coined the term legal plunder. And he has a good test to see if the law takes something from someone and gives it to somebody else. And if a private person doesn't have the right to do that, but the government does, that's legal plunder. And it's wrong. The fact that the government does it doesn't make it right. The government, through literally physical force, can do what an individual would normally go to jail for. Justice Ginsburg was in Germany being interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and she said that the U.S. Constitution was inferior, and she would refer to other documents subsequently written, like in the past 30 or 40 years, that she thinks are better than the U.S. Constitution. Now, I think she should be impeached for that, and she's one of the justices that has quoted foreign law in her decisions.
Unbelievable.
What are the producers going to do? If you confiscate the results of what people produce, eventually the producers are going to think, I don't have to work as hard because I don't get the fruits of my labor. And that's why communism works against human nature.
Yeah, well, you see that in the video in Cuba, where these buildings were beautiful, the cars were, brand new, and then you go, how many years later, 50 or so years later?
Because people owned the buildings. They took care of them because it was in their interest to do that. If the government owns the property, it's just like in the early collective farms in communist Russia, where they took people's farming farms and they made them collective. At 5 o'clock, they turned off the tractor in the middle of the field and they went home because it didn't matter. Whereas if it was their own field, they'd keep plowing until it was too dark to see. And so although the Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto said that universal laziness is a claim but would not happen, it in fact is what you see Havana has become today. Yeah,
well, it's just real apparent when you have your own business, you're going to do whatever it takes to make your business succeed. And then the people that you hire, they're going to put in their time And the time isn't always productive. It depends on the quality of person you have. But they have a purpose, and if they do work hard, they want, a pay raise.
Yeah, they get
and if there's no motivation, they're not.
Yeah, that's right. There's an author, Ayn Rand, wrote a book called Atlas Shrugged, which is ultimately is about the producers of the world deciding that they weren't going to have their produce confiscated anymore, and they'd essentially go on strike. And whether it happens explicitly or gradually, eventually the producers of the world they're not going to produce if they can't keep the results of their efforts.
Yep, just common sense, you would think. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the judicial branch, even a little bit about the executive, and the three branches of government is there to protect us, so there isn't tyranny. And where does the legislature come in?
A good example in Oregon was Measure 49, which is essentially designed to gut the property rights ballot measure that passed. And the legislature was not particularly honest about the effect of 49. And they said, well, Measure 37, which requires compensation for regulatory takings, was going to cost too much money. And people bought that argument, as opposed to the counter argument would be, well, if regulatory takings are going to cost the government so much money, stop doing it.
We're just about out of time, so I just want to mention the New World Order you mentioned, Agenda 21. I have a picture of the guildstones that have the 10 Commandments of the New World Order. Well, we're talking about the 10 planks, the 10 Commandments. Can we see a picture of that? Okay, this is in Georgia, and I believe they went up in 1988. And the first commandment of the New World Order fits right into Agenda 21 is depopulation.
Right, throwing people off land that they own for some purpose, either global warming or just control. That's Agenda 21. New World Order, it also includes a worldwide government like the UN taxing the nations. We have to say no to that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I believe that we have a decision. We have one of two decisions. We have the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto blended with the New World Order agenda, or we have the 10 Commandments. And I want to talk about
there are two property-related commandments in the 10 out of the Bible. One is thou shalt not steal, and that applies to individuals, but it also applies to governments, because it's the government theft of property. What Bastiat said was legal plunder is really the worst, because there's nowhere to go. If someone robs you, you can take them to court. There's a mechanism for redress there. If the government steals from you, you have no choice. The other thing is thou shalt not covet, because a large part of liberalism is envy. They want to bring down everybody to the same level because they see someone having more than they do, and they can't stand that. And that's theft of all types of property, not just real property.
Right on. And I also want to read from Joshua 1:6. It says, be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give to them. And that is a promise for those who keep his commandments, that we will have land that we inherit.